I'm very excited to be here today to be hosting this session of the inaugural Asia Pacific Science Policy Business Forum, entitled Turning the Tide on Marine Plastic Pollution Towards Greater Transparency and Sustainable Investment. Today, single-use plastic account for over a third of plastics produced every year, with 98% manufactured from fossil fuels, producing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and contributing to climate change. Plastic pollution is especially devastating to marine ecosystem. The use of chemical additives in plastics may be hazardous to human health. UNEP studies show that there is a considerable risk of microplastic particles transferring toxins into the food chain. Momo and marine animals ingest plastic particles. Countries in Asia and the Pacific are at the center of the marine litter and plastic pollution crisis, with some countries in the region representing the biggest contributors and others disproportionately affected by the impacts of marine plastic debris on their shores. Greater transparency across the plastic supply chain is crucial to ending ocean plastic pollution, and multiple sectors need to come together to make a difference. To help me set the scene and better understand the context, the opportunities, and what is at stake are His Excellency Hans Bratskar, Special Envoy for the UNEA Presidency, Ministry of Climate and Environment, Norway. Navrizal Tahar, Director of Solid Waste Management, Ministry of Environment and Forestry in Indonesia. Tomoe Kotani, Deputy Director Division of Global Environment, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Japan. Jakob Duer, President and CEO of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. Praveen Hariharan, Sector Leader at IBM. Dominic Charles, Director of Finance and Transparency at the Minderoo Foundation, Australia, and lead author of influential reports on the topic. Phineas Glover, Head of Environment, Social and Governance, Credit Suisse. Heidi Teit, Founder and CEO, Tangaroa Blue Foundation, and also here as Citizen Science Representative Groups. And Dr. Nanjing Jiang, Secretary General of the All China Environment Federation. I welcome our distinguished panel, and without further ado, I would like to start by understanding the size of the challenge. And I would like now to turn to Dr. Jiang. Dr. Jiang, what is the size of the marine litter problem in Asia Pacific? And can we really track and trace the marine plastic pollution globally and in the region?
Yes, with science policy and business, it now make a big change in plastic recycling. Now there are increasing studies in plastic recycling from international and national agencies in recent years, which is obvious towards circular economy. So China is one third of world plastic production. Of almost 82 million tons in 2019, which is the largest and also the largest consumption country. Among these, 20 is made for plastic film. And about 50 is used for packaging. However, like polyethylenes, which is made for films, is still relying on import of over 30%. So as for replacing single-use plastic, China has set up all the capacities of major five materials, so also which is 30% of the global production. So for preventing leaking plastic into the ocean, China has the harmless waste treatment rate 1990 0.4 percentage in 2019 of these 210 million tons of total municipal solid waste. So far, landfill is still the main dominant percentage of 60%, and incineration takes 38%. plastic recycling rate is about 30%, which is still not enough, and there still far to go. So for policy as the leading role of China of a plastic production, China has made a top level design on plastic pollution, which can be summarized as ban of imported waste plastic in 2018, a new ban of single-use plastic in 2020, waste sorting adopted in new solid waste law in 2020, and promotion of a non-waste city. So the next 5-year national plan make clear green, low carbon, and circular development of plastic, and more scientific treatment of biodegradable plastics. It also brought great changes in business through value chain. Our recycling sector enterprise are making efforts to set up a domestic recycling system and use of waste PET, HTPE, PP, such as from bottle to bottle, textile to textile, carpet to carpet. With a much lower value of waste to save the cost and the high value of recycled products for profits. But this cannot be done by only recycling sector. It also raises higher requirements for closing loop with higher value. It needs the whole value chain, such as polymers and branding companies, consumers to take their responsibility, which is called EPR, extended producer responsibility. However, post-consumer recycling of circular economy is a systematic challenge. It also requires from design side of a single material, separate plastic waste sorting in cities in the front side and policy subsidize. As EU, US, and Asia Pacific are also increasing their capacity in recycling, so China recycling equipment manufacturing is exporting to all over the world, and there is an increasing opportunities for China to work with all the countries for dealing with waste. Recycling sector is also upgrading many young entrepreneurs in our committee in recycling sectors are PhDs, like in R&D in modification technology, high added value recycling products, and LCA. So now we are working on a new business digital platform called Green Inclusive 绿普惠, with the support of Ministry of Ecology and Environment and Energy Foundation, that all the carbon reduction behaviors of individuals such as in transportation, recycling, food waste, online shopping can be measured using the uniform carbon reduction standards and recorded as its individual, enterprise, and city account to provide incentive for further for individual to return the waste. For its value chain of plastic recycling, carbon reduction can play a key role to empower the recycling sector to be traceable, measurable, and traded in the future carbon market. This can help SME to gain more profits from the carbon capital for the closed loop. So we are also working on carbon labeling of packaging with branding companies. We could see with their committed to be carbon neutral, which will provide the pilots for further collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang. Now I would like to turn to Dominic Charles. You've written influential studies on marine plastic litter, I understand, and according to reports by the Minderoo Foundation, every month over 1 million tons of plastic enters rivers and ocean worldwide, and billions of dollars are spent by governments in attempting to manage plastic waste. And at the same time, much of the industry of plastic producers, users, and investors operate without sufficient transparency. So, why does transparency matter? And how can better transparency help put an end to plastic pollution?
Thank you, Nako. Let me just first say it's on behalf of myself and the Minderoo Foundation, it's an honor to be invited to talk today. I'd like to make 3 points. I'll start by kind of directly answering your question and making the philosophical case for transparency. I'll then give a couple of examples of areas where greater transparency really will make a difference, and then end with just a kind of soft warning on the limits of transparency. But firstly, the philosophical case, it really comes down to you cannot manage what you cannot measure. Decision makers need the right data and knowledge to be able to make better decisions and to make sure we solve this problem. And that means understanding the material flows, the financial flows, the policies and commitments being made by different stakeholders, as well as the impacts of plastic on people and the environment. And we need to do that across the entire life cycle of plastics, all the way from production through to use, waste management, and the ultimate fate. So far, pretty uncontroversial. But why is transparency so important in the plastic supply chain? That's probably the real question. And I think there are a few different reasons. Firstly, as you alluded to in your introduction, the plastic pollution crisis and the marine litter crisis is just very urgent and really quite fresh. It's a problem that less than a generation ago we really weren't aware of, and it's crept up on us very quickly. So there's lots we don't know, and that's why we need transparency. The second reason is that this entire supply chain is terrifyingly complex. So if we just for a second think about material flows, and we just take one part of the plastics value chain, packaging, we need to encompass the entire petrochemical value chain, from extraction to cracking of monomers to the production of polymers, and the link that the previous speaker talked about to carbon and climate emissions. We need to think about alternatives to fossil fuel plastics, so bio-based materials, biodegradable materials, different PHAs, PLAs, and having an understanding of those, which ones are compostable at home, which ones require industrial composting. We need to understand different recycled polymers, food grade, non-food grade standards for mechanical recycling, different types of chemical and advanced recycling. We need to have an understanding of the hundreds, if not thousands, of additives and colorants and fillers that change the performance of different plastics. And then finally, we get to the materials, and there's a proliferation of different materials, from rigid plastic packaging, flexible packaging, multi-layer, multi-materials, and they really affect the ability to sort and manage from the waste management sector. Then we get into the question of recyclability. Which plastics are theoretically recyclable, actually recycled, and finally, what is then the fate of different plastics? So, which plastics are burned and buried in a formal way, i.e., incinerated and landfilled? Which ones are discarded into the environment? All of the different pathways through terrestrial leakage into river and marine aquatic pollution. Now, that's just the material flows for one part of this system for packaging. So you can see that this is just intensely complex, and we need greater transparency to understand these moving parts. And then thirdly, and the previous speaker talked very eloquently about this. This is a systems level problem. We have industry, finance, and policymakers all needing to pull together in the same direction in order to tackle this problem. And therefore, we need common measures and a common understanding and transparency to do that. So that's the philosophical case for transparency, why it matters. Just a couple of examples, where we feel real priorities where greater transparency will make a difference. So the first one is pure and simply just in disclosure. So we have outside-in reports that tell us, how much plastic companies are producing. We have the beginnings of voluntary reporting, especially by the users of plastic, on how much plastic they're putting on the market. What we need to leap to very quickly is mandated, regulated disclosure of a plastic waste footprint by the largest producer and the largest users of plastic. We already have this in climate. We have the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. We need this in plastics as well. The second one is on traceability standards. So we firmly believe that one of the answers to this problem will be greater recycling, and one of the policy levers to make that happen will be minimum recycled content standards. But in order for any system like that to be in place, we need to have an effective way to trace and validate the recycled content in plastics and in polymers. I'm hoping one of the panelists who's coming later on will talk about the data challenge in doing that, and how things like blockchain will actually be able to help us and help industry rapidly come to a standard traceability solution. So then I said I would end with a kind of soft warning on the limits of transparency. And I think that's that, we cannot let our desire for greater transparency be an excuse for inaction. So, we cannot make perfect the enemy of the good. So, for example, we know today that many countries in the Asia-Pacific region are literally being flooded with cheap fossil fuel produced single-use plastic packaging. And the rate at which that packaging is increasing is outpacing the ability of the public sector to pay for the effective waste management of that waste. So we know that the cost, the externality that this plastic is creating needs to be more equitably shared between the public and industry. And we also know that when you look at the top of the value chain, there's just 100 large companies that are responsible for creating the polymers that produce all of this packaging. We also know that there are, if we intervene at that point in the value chain, at the top of the value chain, and we put a levy or a tax or a subsidy on the production of virgin polymers, that will not only raise funds for the management of that waste, but it will level the playing field between the production of fossil fuel plastics and sustainable circular plastics. So we don't need to wait, for all of our transparency wishes to come true. We can just, take the view of cracking on, introduce something that might be blunt at first, that will intervene at that point in the value chain, that will cascade through all the way to waste management and curbing pollution. And that will be better than waiting for the perfect EPR scheme or the perfect coalition between industry and government.
Thank you, Dominic. And to the audience, if you have any questions, there's a chat box. So please feel free to leave your questions and we'll get to them at the end of the session. And now I'd like to welcome Jakob Duer, President and CEO of an organization made up of nearly 50 major global companies who've committed to investing $1.5 billion over the next 5 years to develop, deploy, and bring to scale solutions that will minimize and manage plastic waste and promote post-use solutions. So, Jakob, in your view, what transformative actions can this consortium of influential businesses take to A, mitigate and manage the current crisis at scale, and B, encourage greater transparency?
Thank you very much. And maybe let me start by just introducing the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, because we are still a relatively young organization, only a bit more than 2 years old. And as you indeed said, supported by the private sector across the plastic value chain. And we're headquartered here in Singapore, recognizing that we would like to be and we want to be in the region where we see the majority of the plastic pollution actually happening. Our model is to go in and to develop, deploy, de-risk solutions that are required to end plastic waste in the environment, and then ultimately work with financial institutions and partners in taking these solutions to scale. And as we have heard already by the previous speakers, indeed, managing plastic waste is a very, very complex challenge, and it requires participation by all actors, not only the private sector, but equally much governments, national and local governments, requires participation by civil society organizations, by the academic institutions, by UN agencies, development banks, as well as the broader financial sector. So looking at what are the solutions and the transformative solutions that are required going forward, let me highlight here what we believe are three important areas to look at. First of all is the mitigation part. As a start, of course, we need to always ensure that any consumption and any production is sustainable in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. But when we're looking at plastic waste, in particular in the environment, we still believe that the weakest link in the plastic value chain, when we are looking at it from a circularity perspective, is the waste management side. The reality today is that around 3 billion people, or 40% of the world's population, do not have access to proper waste collection systems. That in itself means that any waste generated by these households, they end up in the environment, including plastic waste. So if you want to put an end to plastic waste in the environment and ultimately in the waste that is leaking into our oceans, and therefore addressing the issue of plastic pollution in oceans, we have to stop the source of where this waste is coming from, and that happens at land. And that's why the Alliance goes in and work in particular in countries here in this region in Southeast Asia on finding solutions as to how can we put in place infrastructure solutions so that we not only ensure that the waste is being sorted at the level of households, but also is being collected and managed in a responsible way, with the objective of ensuring that the waste that has value is recycled to the extent that is possible, and therefore keeping that value within the value chain, contributing also then to a circular economy. As I said, we are relatively young as an organization, but we are very happy that we already have more than 30 projects approved, of which a good majority of them are in different stages of implementation, operating in more than 60 locations across the world. So the first one is to mitigate, and it is to prevent the leakage of any waste, including plastic waste, into the environment. The second area that I would like to focus on is the need for scale. This is a problem of a significant size, and we heard Dominic and yourself also talking about that more than 1 million tons of plastic waste is leaking into the oceans on an annual basis. Therefore, it's not enough that we are finding solutions that are operating and effective only in small communities. Any solutions that we need to bring to the forefront need to be scalable in order for us to have a significant impact on the problem that we are faced with. And with that, not only do all the different actors and organizations that are working this space come together and work together towards this bigger picture and global objective of putting an end to plastic waste in the environment, but we need to work very, very closely with financial institutions. Hundreds of millions or billions of dollars are required to really to develop not only the solutions, but really to take them on to scale. And no development agency or an organization like the Alliance to End Plastic Waste can do this alone. We need to work with financial institutions, we need to work with private equity and venture capital. And what we are seeing out there, and I think everyone who's working in this space knows that trillions of dollars are actually sitting in the ESG space right now, ready to be deployed into solutions that are related towards contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals, including plastic waste in the environment. So our challenge is, and that's not only that of the Alliance, but every actor out there, how do we connect the solutions to where the resources are sitting? How do we de-risk the solutions so that we can attract sufficient investors in to want to invest in the solutions that are required to address this challenge? And let me finish off with the last one and echo what Dominic has been saying here, that transparency is critical. And for that reason, we are working with partners, including IBM, in understanding the challenge related to where is the plastic waste leakage happening, where do we see the magnitude of the problem in particular, and where is it that the solutions are required. And while in an ideal world, we will have all the data in place until we start developing the solutions, unfortunately, we do not live in an ideal world, and we cannot wait until we have all the knowledge that is required for us to implement the very best solutions. Therefore, action is required, transparency is critical, but it should not be a pillow for inaction in the short term. Every day we wait, every day that we are not implementing or elaborating on new solutions to this problem, more plastic waste will leak into the environment and ultimately leak into our oceans.
Thank you, Jakob, for those perspectives. And it's a great segue to invite Phineas Glover, Head of Environment, Social and Governance at Credit Suisse. We'd like to speak about the blue economy and net zero ambition from where you're sitting in the finance sector. What is the role of the finance sector in really driving change in terms of the net zero plastic ambition and given the economic realities?
Thank you, Naka, and it's a real privilege to join this forum and contribute. I think, firstly, from a finance and investor perspective, we have to acknowledge that we have, for the last couple of years, really trying to understand the so-called plastic problem statement, why it's so important to economies, companies, and of course, therefore, investors. As Dominic mentioned, this is a fiendishly complex issue when you start to consider the number of materials within the plastic value chain. And that's just the value chain up to producing a form of packaging. And then you've got the whole new value chain after that in terms of material recycling facilities and waste infrastructure thereafter. I won't sort of pause on the problem statement, but certainly, that has been the focus in the investment industry. It's very clear now that plastic has grown to be the dominant material for packaging, in this post-war period, and has infiltrated almost every aspect of human life. If we were to look at it as a commodity, it's growing faster than any other commodity on the planet over the last 33 years. It's doubled in the last 13 years alone, and it's grown at roughly 2.5 times global GDP growth. And, if we carry on this trajectory, we end up with 12,000 million tons of plastic, either in landfill or more likely in the natural environment. So this is sort of captivated, not just society, but of course also the investment industry, trying to understand what does this mean on a longer term trajectory? What does it mean for all of the companies and the actors in that value chain, all the way from your petrochem companies to your packaging companies, through that to FMCG retailers and into waste and recycling. And that's been our focus. If I go back to 2018, post the China National Sword Policy, which saw this kind of huge fallout in terms of no longer being able to rely on this huge export market for plastic waste and what that meant in other countries. But to summarize that kind of problem statement, and I guess what the investment industry was focusing on initially, it's essentially to say that where there is such a dramatic environmental dislocation, essentially, and such sort of clear potential for systemic externalities, in other words, risks that just simply aren't priced, natural capital that's not priced. This creates potentially substantial investment risks and opportunities. In our work back in 2008, we looked at this and we built a relatively detailed kind of scenario analysis in terms of different policy outcomes. And under that, we basically assessed all of those sectors I mentioned, and we find that petrochems face material earnings risk overall, but importantly, broadly speaking, policy measures to incentivize a move away from plastic packaging upstream, could lead to demand destruction and some of the risks of costs from plastic taxes and so on. So I guess to summarize that, there's been this huge focus on understanding what this means in terms of the value chain. I think, unlike other important ESG themes like climate change, energy transition, we've only just started to map the pathways to net zero in the same way we have for carbon. As Dominic mentioned, we've not really got to the point yet where we're kind of mapping net zero plastic waste. And I think this is really important because unlike carbon, where we can get to ever greater level of kind of detail and granularity in terms of the modeling around what's required, the sad fact is that we're just simply not there yet with plastic, and hence, some of the recommendations of the previous speakers are absolutely critical, and I'd support them. The best attempt at this recently has been the work of the Pew Charitable Trust in their report, Breaking the Plastic Wave. And they actually modeled all the way from present day to 2040, the policies that will be needed to effectively get close to net zero plastic waste. And even then, there's still some leakage, as you might expect. I thought it would be useful just to map some of that, because that has real, it does provide us with a blueprint in terms of what we need to do to get there. But it also, from our perspective as a bank, creates huge risks and opportunities in terms of financing and investment. And, has been a real guide in terms of the role Credit Suisse can play. That analysis shows that we need to reduce growth in plastic production and consumption by 1/3 relative to projected growth, which basically means achieving flat per capita consumption of plastic packaging versus what would have been a 60% increase on the BAU. So that's just a reduction, and that gets you 30% of the way there. We then need to substitute 17% of plastic production with alternatives by 2040. So that's paper, coated paper, and compostables. So that's, the real innovation in terms of alternatives. From our perspective, a really fascinating, an interesting growth market. We need to design products and packaging for recycling to expand the share of economically recyclable plastic from around 21% at present to more like 54% by 2040. Again, that's going to require huge research and development, and it's going to support, require capital support by way of investment. And then finally, we need to expand waste collection rates up to 90% in all urban areas and 50% in rural areas by 2040. And we also need to double mechanical recycling capacity globally. So when you add that together, that sounds it sounds so like such a high level of ambition. It feels quite remote, but in any of these pathways, as we've seen with the energy transition, climate change, as we further enhance the information and the data, we will be able to further support these kinds of studies and get better information in terms of what's needed to get there. And so finally, I think it's important to say that at this stage, investor and corporate coalitions are growing by the day. It's somewhat plateaued during COVID in relation to the plastic thematic, but we were up to that point seeing real momentum in terms of government policy, where in the space of 2 years post the China National Sword policy, we saw many countries step up. In particular, I think we should, I would like to place on record the excellent work of the Minderoo Foundation and their initiative See the Future. They've really moved the dial and had influence in the investment industry. Also, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and their New Plastics Economy work with their Global Commitment Initiative has also really resonated with the investment industry, where they've reached around 20% of all plastic packaging produced globally as a signatory. So that's an amazing achievement. More recently, we are now seeing the investment industry step up with the UNPRI facilitating an investor coalition, engaging with the largest plastic polluters in the world to help shape their corporate strategies and improve recyclability of packaging. And then finally, Credit Suisse recently stepped up its focus on the blue economy, publishing the first of its kind assessment of the importance of the oceans to the global economy. And in that study, we found that the value of global ocean assets is around $24 trillion US, making it the 7th largest economy in the world, and absolutely invaluable to sustaining whole nations, whole economies. And a very critical aspect of the thematic of plastic, given the inevitable impacts of plastic on biodiversity and oceans. So I think the way I would describe things, is that there's been quite a bit of time and focus on actually understanding what's going on, mapping the value chain, the impacts. There is huge potential, in ESG assets and sustainable finance. For the moment, it has been focused much more on climate change more directly and facilitating that energy transition. This being said, we're in the early days of a major growth opportunity. When I say growth opportunity, what I really mean there is an opportunity to actually confront this challenge and channel all of that sustainable finance and ESG capital into those solutions. So we're very much getting there, and I think we'll see this thematic rebuild in terms of momentum over the next year or so.
Thank you. No, thank you, Phineas. I'd like to now welcome Praveen Hariharan, Sector Leader at IBM. And so far today, through the conversation, all the experts could not have overemphasized the importance of transparency and the need for greater access, especially to data and analytics. And I understand IBM have spearheaded important projects across the UN, citizen science, and with the private sector that use AI and other technologies to help integrate, manage, and analyze data on marine pollution, including work with UNEP and with the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, as Jakob mentioned. So do please give us an idea about this work and what are the lessons learned so far.
Yeah, thank you so much, Naka. And again, as some of the other speakers said, it's a privilege to be here in front of you, and I'm very happy to be invited for this. So I will share some learnings, as you mentioned, from 2 pieces of work regarding this data challenge. The first one is a prototype that we actually did for UNEP for the Global Marine Litter Program. And the other one, which is named as PRISM, which is the work that we did with Jakob's team in AEPW, which of course is still something that we are working on. And then I will also give a little bit about where digital and innovation is actually leading to new processes and new materials, which is also very interesting. But I'll make a quick mention of that. So the first part is, I think Dominic talked a lot about increased transparency. And in the last half an hour, I think all of us heard a lot of numbers. Now, the challenge is there are so many reports and data around, and the methodologies vary, the terms and definitions vary. And what we try to achieve with data platforms, which we prototype for UNEP, as well as the work with PRISM that we are doing with AEPW, is to bring together a platform where you can highlight the differences and look at an overall objective, which is harmonizing the methodologies so that you are able to compare apples to apples. Otherwise, we've seen there is a lot of discrepancies the moment you pick data from different sources. And of course, in such data platforms, there is a mix of model data and actual data because data is not available for everything. And as you rightly said, Naka, we use artificial intelligence for modeling and archetype determination so that we get the complete data set in place. Now, what such a availability of data does is it gives an increased visibility in the value chain. Again, as some of our earlier speakers pointed out, if you get this 360-degree visibility right from plastic consumption in terms of what are the polymers, what is the waste generation data, the MSW, the plastic waste, and go to the next step in the value chain, to get to the level of what is collected and treated, and also what is the existing and upcoming infrastructure. So that gives you the clear visibility across the value chain. And now if you have all of these in place, what happens is that when such a platform is fully implemented and applied, you can get to the level of specific polymer recycling investments. The tool can actually guide you in terms of identifying the material for geographies. Now, even if you look at certain brands and retailers who are doing R&D either on products or packaging, as some of our speakers pointed out, they could look at what will be the impact of local conditions in terms of whether this polymer will eventually be collected and recycled, or whether it will just add to the uncollected waste, or is it actually going to leak into the oceans. And this will help to make pretty useful decisions which could impact the entire society. And also when it comes to people who are funding the projects and who are actually managing the projects, availability of this transparent data to one is to decide on the investments, and secondly to track whether these investments are yielding results is also very useful, right? So this is some of our quick learnings from data. I will just touch upon a couple of innovations that IBM is also working on. So one is in terms of the fundamental recycling process itself. So there is a pilot that we are doing called WALCAT. Now, I think we all know that a significant portion, maybe about 25% of plastic in the plastic industry is the PET type, and the traditional mechanical processes which are used to recycle PET, they consume a lot of electricity and water because there's a lot of cleaning and sorting involved. Using this WALCAT system, which is actually a short form for a volatile catalyst, that is actually the key ingredient behind this innovation. It converts PET waste into recycled waste, which is very similar to the virgin PET and can be used to create new plastics. And we do have a joint venture between a few companies like IBM, Under Armour, and Technip, each of who bring their own strengths, such as the chemical know-how from Technip, the supply chain from Under Armour, and the technology from IBM, who is validating and optimizing this whole WALCAT process. And looking to pilot this kind of a phase in 2022. And again, why I'm mentioning this is there is a need to get more innovative in terms of processes for recycling, as Jakob also mentioned. And the last point I would like to mention is also our own research team in IBM is working even on new materials which can actually replace the current methods. And one very interesting one, which I would like to state, is on upcycling carbon dioxide. I think, again, a lot of our earlier speakers talked about how carbon dioxide, CO2 itself is an issue, but it is available abundantly, inexpensive, and renewable. And interestingly, there are CO2-based polycarbonates which can be a potential source of renewable raw material. But the challenge, the chemical challenge in terms of its thermodynamic and kinetic stability, is that you need to have very high temperature and pressure, which can actually negate the whole benefit of actually doing the CO2 capture and upcycling. So new catalysts and synthetic protocols are required so that there is a substantial efficiency improvement, and then you can convert CO2 to new materials such as aliphatic polycarbonates, which are eventually having properties where you can create material very similar to what you do with plastics. So with that move from what you can do with data and innovation in terms of process and material, let me hand it back to you, Naka. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that, Praveen. I'd now like to move to civic action and invite Heidi Tite, founder and CEO of Tangaroa Blue Foundation in Australia, and also here as representing citizen science representative groups. Heidi, you've been an advocate of citizen science and how it could help play a crucial role in bridging the data gaps that exist when we talk about marine litter. Tell me more about this work and its implications on future action.
Thanks, Naka. And I would just like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land that I'm joining you from today, the Gia and the Ngaro people, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And also to thank the conveners for the opportunity to be here today. So marine debris litter, we know, is mainly made up of plastic, in general around 75%, but in some of the remote communities around Australia, it can be up in the 95% range. Much is left to local government or community efforts to clean up what ends up in the environment. But this sector has very little power to stop it at the source at the scale that's actually needed. So this direct connection of marine litter, which impacts, among other things, local amenity to community members, is why citizen scientists can and are very willing to contribute to solutions that mitigate it at its source. So citizen scientists are in the communities, they're out in the field, and therefore they provide a cost-effective opportunity to fill long-term data gaps. But citizen science has been undervalued due to questions of its scientific robustness, which we would argue that out of the many environmental issues the world is facing right now that have big data gaps, marine litter is one that could benefit from strategic and long-term regional monitoring programs. So in Australia, the Tangaroa Blue Foundation coordinates the Australian Marine Debris Initiative. It's been running now for 17 years and has had more than 150,000 volunteers and 2,000 partner organisations contributed to the Australian Marine Debris Initiative database. That database now is just about to tick over 20 million data points from across 4,000 sites across Australia. And this data has been used in local, state and federal government platforms, including being used in Australia's voluntary reporting frameworks on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We also work closely with universities such as the University of New South Wales and the University of Tasmania with this data, and this really assists in ensuring that the data can stand up to scrutiny and is fit for purpose. So the volunteer effort equates to around $16 million in volunteer hours, and this shows the commitment of civil society on this issue and how they definitely want to be involved and part of the solution. A second example is from Ghana, and through the government statistical department, citizen science data has been accepted for use in government policy and other decision-making processes. So the way to do this is to connect citizen scientists to universities, government or industry frameworks that can provide the programs with accepted robustness, and by providing the opportunity, the tools, training and resources to assist in filling the data gaps that we all keep hearing about. However, it must be done in a credible and a scalable, integrated and strategic framework, and it needs to connect all stakeholder groups to guide the investment, and that has to eliminate duplication of effort and resources in the marine litter space. And this is so desperately needed. For example, currently in Australia, it would be possible that 3 layers of government and a philanthropic body all fund 3 or 4 different organisations to conduct beach cleanups at the same beach on the same day without any knowledge of what was happening there with other investment. Some of those groups may or may not be collecting data that may all go into different places, and the strategy behind choosing that beach in the first place might just be that it was someone's favourite beach as a child. So this is a massive waste of resource and effort. And by providing some integrated and strategic frameworks around that, we can really value the volunteer effort and the citizen science effort with on-ground effort in places that it's so desperately needed. In addition, connecting with what the other speakers have been saying, we believe that civil society and the general public needs evidence to have a higher confidence in the frameworks and processes, agreements, initiatives, and information that's being promoted out there. There are so many claims to provide solutions to this massive environmental problem, including the one on marine litter and plastics, and that we need real rigorous and immediate elimination of false claims and greenwashing to provide consumer confidence in where their investment dollar is going to be. So I think that from a civil society perspective, we can contribute data to data gaps, and we also need to have the confidence in what we purchase to make sure that we're able to contribute to solving this problem from both ends of the spectrum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heidi, for that. And ladies and gentlemen, thus far this session, we looked at perspectives and actions that eloquently represent the knowledge and contribution of research, the private sector, the finance sector, and the non-governmental bodies. But now it's time to take stock of government action to manage and mitigate pollution. So it's my pleasure to welcome Navrizol Tahar, Director of Solid Waste Management, Ministry of Environment and Forestry of Indonesia, the world's largest archipelagic nation. So in Indonesia, with 70% of the population living in coastal areas, the ocean economy generates 1/4 of the country's GDP. How is the National Action Plan to reduce marine debris by 70% by 2025, helping the countries move towards blue economy? And what is required to scale up and accelerate this work?
Okay, thank you so much, Naka. Good afternoon, gentlemen, distinguished speakers, guests, and participants. Government of Indonesia respond on marine plastic litter and plastic pollution was considerably fast and well by issuing National Plan of Action for Combating Marine Litter that is regulated by Presidential Regulation Number 83 2018 with ambitious target to reduce marine litter by 70% in 2025. To implement the plan of action, the government established national coordinating team that is co-chaired by coordinating Minister for Maritime and Investment Affairs and Minister of Environment and Forestry. Based on survey and analysis that was conducted by the Secretariat of National Implementing Team in 2018, within 3 years implementation, we have succeeded to reduce marine plastic litter by 15.3% in 2020. While controlling marine plastic litter a positive direction, however, we still need working very consistency and effective collaboration since we have target to reduce 70% marine plastic litter in less than 4 years. Inviting other parties such as local authorities, NGO, and academy to join the effort is a must. In December 9, Ministry of Environment and Forestry stipulated Minister Regulation Number 70 year 2019 concerning the obligation of producers to reduce the waste that come from their product packaging and container, as well as from plastic bag. We call the extended producer responsibility. The regulation provides roadmap of waste reduction by producer in the period of 2020 until 2029 by implementing waste limitation through the redesign program and take-back scheme for recycling and reusing with target 30% of total production of goods and packaging in 2029. Ministerial regulation is a policy instrument to implement responsible consumption and production pattern in Indonesia that change gradually mass consumption and production pattern. One of the most important substantive item is the producer. Brand owner has obligation to redesign their product and packaging in order to meet the following criteria: reusable, recyclable, compostable, durable, refillable, and returnable, as well as recycled content. In July 2021, Ministry of Environment and Forestry published Ministerial Regulation Number 14 year 2021 concerning bank sampah or waste bank, with the objective to strengthen capacity of waste bank as part of collection and recycling system in Indonesia. In the aspect of single-use plastic limitation, at the present, we have published 72 local policy that ban the use of plastic bag, plastic straw, and plastic foam container. Ladies and gentlemen, Ministry of in maritime and fisheries sector, some activities have been conducted to reduce marine plastic litter and pollution, such as providing plastic waste treatment facility in several islands and fishing ports, as well as implementing international standard 14,000 at several fishing ports across the country. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Tahar. And now I'd like to invite Ms. Tomoe Kotani from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Japan. She is the Deputy Director Division of Global Environment. So thank you for joining us. I know Japan has advanced policies that support a more circular approach to marine plastics litter, which successfully resulted in the reduction of final disposal. Japan is also a champion of development assistance in this area. So, what are the lessons to be learned from this, especially in terms of investment in innovation? And what were the economic implications linked to this approach?
Thank you very much. First of all, I am very honored to be here with distinguished panelists and a moderator. I'd also like to express my appreciation to UNEP and then our partner, UNEP Asia and then the Pacific Office. I would like to provide answers that Ms. Kondo just raised. The first learning from supporting a more circular approach to marine plastic litter that resulted in the reduction of final disposal is the importance of national commitment to the issues like marine plastic litter shared with other countries. The Osaka Blue Ocean Vision, which aims to reduce additional pollution from marine plastic waste to zero by 2050, are shared by 87 countries and regions currently. To do Japan's part in realizing the vision, Japan launched Marine Initiative in 2019, focusing on management of wastes, recovery of marine litter, innovation, and empowerment in developing countries to promote waste management, recovery, and innovation. More specifically, Japan's support has been towards the plastic waste reduction through strengthening of waste management capacity, water and air pollution control, plastic waste reduction through the 3R, and promotion of circular society. This has been done from our experience that Japan dealt with pollution and waste for a long time, technologies by Japanese private companies. Another learning is that the sound waste management is still the priority for many countries in the region. Japan is supporting UNEP to implement the project countermeasure to reduce river-based plastic pollution along the lower Mekong River basin, the Ganges River in India and in Sri Lanka. The project results highlight the urgent need to create a waste separation, collection, and the treatment system in every area adjacent to rivers and lakes. The project has collected data on more than 2,000 plastic leakage hotspots. The project confirms that microplastic contamination is widespread. UNEP and Japan support the construction of long-term plastic waste management systems, Mekong River Commission, and its participating countries by making full use of cooperation of local citizens and universities and the analysis of images and big data using artificial intelligence. Lastly, but not least, we have learned that circular society will lead to new business models and market expansion, and will be the source of future industrial competitiveness. For example, in the Philippines, with the support of Yokohama City, JICA, and the Ministry of Environment of Japan, a Japanese company with recycling technology has established a system to manufacture fluff fuel from waste plastic and supply it to a local cement company. The stable use of fluff fuel has helped to reduce waste plastic in landfills and greenhouse gas emission and to prevent marine plastic litter. We hope that the spread of these new business models will accelerate the movement toward a circular economy in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Kotani. And now I would like to invite Ambassador Hans Bratskar, Special Envoy for Norway, the UNEA 5 presidency. And as we approach UNEA 5.2 in 2022, which also coincides with UNEP at 50, the 50th anniversary of UNEP, and Stockholm Plus 50, 50 years since the first UN conference on the human environment was held in Stockholm. So the question is this: is the world on the right track to curb the marine plastic pollution? And in your view, what are the ambitious actions that pave the way towards a safer and cleaner environment?
Well, thank you so much. But please allow me first to, on behalf of the UNEP 5 presidency, to thank all the distinguished panelists for sharing their reflections, insights, and experiences. And we have learned that much needs to be done, but that we have solutions that can be implemented in a practical ways in the years to come. The issue of plastic pollution is indeed, as we have heard, a global one, but it presents different challenges in different regions, sub-regions, countries, and indeed at the local level. We have learned and heard alarming facts from the scientific community, the devastating consequences of plastic pollution, notably for marine ecosystems and for our economies. We have heard that if the present business as usual continues, the level of plastic production is estimated to double by 2025. And in order to meet a growing populations, the need of growing populations with changing consumption patterns. Our discussions today have shown that regional leadership of the Asia-Pacific region is needed, and its promise for transformative action to address one of the fastest growing environmental challenges for our time is something we all need to see. Dear friends, today we are all part of a global plastics economy, but we are provided with an opportunity for change towards a more circular economy for plastics. Plastic has, as we have heard today, and we know very well, a number of great advantages to our modern society. But plastic also poses a huge threat when it ends up in the environment. We need to get smarter about the ways in which we produce, use, and dispose of plastics so that plastic products can be reused, remanufactured, or recycled, and maintained in the economy for as long as possible. We have also heard a strong call for better knowledge of the amounts and contents of plastic in our markets. Measures must be targeted throughout the entire life cycle of plastics. We need more sustainable plastic products by addressing plastic production design and use, including additives and harmful substances, and address intentionally added microplastics with the aim of having a toxic-free circular economy for plastics. I'm truly inspired by what I've heard here today from business, industry, the banking sector, about digital solutions, civil society contributions, government and policy action. Many inspiring initiatives are being taken, and many sectors are now assuming their part of the responsibility. But as I come from an ocean nation, allow me please to speak in maritime terms for a few minutes. There is no doubt, if we are to be successful in addressing plastic pollution, that we need all hands on deck. We need to make sure that we pool our resources and pull and haul in the same direction. This requires an ambitious concerted framework for action that includes all stakeholders. We have heard discussions about the ambitious actions that are needed to pave the way forward, and that we must do this together. The Science Policy Business Forum provides a unique opportunity for the exchange between all stakeholders and to share our experiences to promote joint action and joint commitment. I'm proud to see how this forum truly meets the interface between science, business, and policy. The next session of the United Nations Environment Assembly will provide us with the opportunity to take that action needed to provide an effective response to the urgency and the magnitude of this problem. Many countries are now calling for UNEA 5 Part 2 to make decisions to start negotiations for a new global agreement on plastic pollution as a long-term solution. And with that in mind, I very much look forward to seeing you all at the resumed session of UNEA 5 in February, March 2022. And thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now would like to open the floor to interventions. Atika Patel, representing the Youth Major Group. Well, so maybe I would then go around the floor to our panelists and hear their thoughts and aspirations on the ambitious actions that they believe would pave the way for cleaner oceans and waters. So please, you each have 3 minutes to share your recommendations with us. Bullet points 1, 2, 3, and I would like to start with, well, I guess we should go in the order in which we spoke. So if it is okay, Dr. Jiang, I would like to invite you back and share with us your 3 recommendations, the actions that pave the way forward.
Yeah, I'm very inspired by all the panelists, and I think there are really a lot of we can join together to work. We are still focusing on promoting circular economy with carbon reduction. So now the first we would first through these standards. I think now we are working like with Consumer Goods Forum on from this design golden design rule, like in packaging to reduce packaging, and then link this with carbon reduction, and also other like for plastic packaging alternative materials that can really be contributed to climate change. And the second point, so we are also we realize these one sector cannot work by itself. So now we are now working with using digital technologies, like for other sectors, like for logistic food deliver, as China has a more advanced e-commerce business. So we are working with all these digital platform, and we want to link these plastic issue to make these sectors to be more plastic free, efficient, and also reduce carbon emissions. And third, I think we're also working on more with consumers themselves, using like these labeling to be more traceable, and also use these digital technologies as we are building up these platform. So I think a further work with the international agencies and the technologies company would be very helpful for our groundwork. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jiang. Thank you so much for that. Dominic, you're up next.
Thank you, Naka. Let me give you 2. One, a very specific one related to transparency, and then the second one, a more general point. So at the Midori Foundation, we're working on an exciting use of technology that is harnessing the power of satellite imagery and artificial intelligence algorithms to detect plastic in the environment, both on land and in ocean. So right now, the best estimates we have for plastic pollution in the environment are all based on models. There's some ground truthing done, as Heidi described, but like that is really just at the fringes in terms of like the total scale of the problem. But actually, like we have some really exciting, encouraging early results that suggest like we actually like can using these kind of algorithms right now detect the presence of plastics in a kind of 10 meter by 10 meter pixel area. And we think that actually we'll be able to get volumetric estimates of the mass of plastic in the environment as well. So I think that will be a very exciting and very important kind of advance in our understanding of the plastic pollution problem. The general point I'd make is just in the question you asked to the ambassador. Are we headed in the right direction? I think it's hard to conclude anything other than no. So we are expecting that the petrochemical industry is going to add 30% additional capacity to produce fossil fuel based single-use plastics over the next 4 or 5 years. So it's very much business as usual. And we've also heard about the need to scale solutions to address the marine litter problem and the increase more plastics being made in a sustainable way. That does indeed need finance and investment to make it happen, but that finance and investment will not get unlocked if we do not address the fundamental imbalance between the economies of scale enjoyed by the fossil fuel industry and petrochemical companies making virgin linear plastics and all the alternative models, be they recycling or substitutes or even reuse. So we really urgently need policymakers to give us more bold and ambitious line of sight into how we are going to correct that effective market failure and ensure that there is a level playing field that will allow us to get that money invested in circular and sustainable plastic economy.
Thank you. And now, before we go to Jakob for the ambitions of the future, I actually want to jump back because Neth Daniel, representing the science and technology major groups, has actually joined us now. So I'd like to go and, oh, hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to emphasize as well that I'm also representing the Asia Pacific Regional CSO Engagement Mechanism in presenting this intervention. A critical element for achieving greater transparency to turn the tide on ocean plastic pollution is direct involvement of people and communities. Just as emphasized by the farmer representatives during the opening session, the people element in the Science Policy Business Forum needs to be very explicit. Like if we need to change the name, that would even be better, but there's no science, no policy will work without people, always for the participation of people from producers and governments that are mandated to enforce regulations is critical, is very important when we talk about transparency. Beyond citizen science, to gather and feed data to inform policies and business decisions, we believe that people's actions are very much needed to address this code red issue. It's not just climate change that is code red in category, but also plastic pollution, and all the speakers have emphasized that. Public information and education is key to ensuring that effective and meaningful participation of people in monitoring, ensuring accountability, and demanding greater transparency. Education on the whole chain and on the life cycle of plastic from production to use important information. And it's not just about the plastic use, but all other uses that have impact on human health and also the environment. And we also believe that public information and education should also include the discussion of and deliberation on impact of plastics on the environment and human health, including microplastics. The next point is about accountability of producers, ensuring that there is disclosure, mandatory disclosure on manufacturing, selling, and trading of plastics is important. When we talk of transparency, like information about manufacturing, selling, and informed by government, also to inform people's actions, and also to demand responsibility among producers. As mentioned by Dominic, yet just as the world is coming to realize the dangers of plastic pollution and to take action to prevent this, it is ironic that the petrochemical industry is poised to invest billions to expand plastic production by 40% in the next few decades. If they succeed, plastic will outweigh fish on our oceans by 2050. There has to be coherence on the action of the private sector, in particular the producers of plastic, and also where the world is leading in terms of addressing this code red issue. On traceability, we see that traceability will only be effective if the role of communities is emphasized and made explicit. Role of communities in not just recycling, but ensuring that management and also addressing concerns on plastic is done at source. And also role of community in validating claims on recyclability and recycled content of plastic, and claims on biodegradability of materials. We in developing countries have witnessed how so-called oxo-biodegradable plastics were actually promoted as alternative, but in the end, they turned out not to be biodegradable at all. So there has to be independent science to validate those claims, and in that independent science that works with people's movement. Lastly, the importance of solid waste management policies and programs cannot be overemphasized, as explained by the minister from Indonesia. The importance of promoting reuse, recycle are key, but all the more the importance of promoting the need to refuse plastic and use of alternative, really biodegradable materials. And this also reflects a lot on how we as consumers actually consume, and how we as consumers look at materials in terms of the way we consume. At the global level, civil society has been strongly pushing for the start very soon of the negotiations on the Convention on Plastic Pollution at the global level. And we hope that a key outcome of the 5th UN Environment Assembly will be the beginning of these negotiations on the Convention on Plastic Pollution. So thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of APRSM.
Yes, no, thank you, Nathaniel. And I am going to jump right back to the ambitious actions that pave the way, and back to you, Jakob.
Thank you very much. And let me just, I think, echo what everyone has been saying here, that this is indeed an extremely complex challenge to address the issue of plastic pollution or plastic waste in the environment. But I also do want to say that I am encouraged by what we have seen over the last few years. I don't think any other development agenda has gotten so much attention in such a short period of time. If we only look 5 or 6 years back, nobody spoke about plastic waste in the environment. Today, it's on the top, I would say, of the world development agenda. And I think the moves that we have seen from all different actors in the value chain have been extremely encouraging, including the moves that we have seen from governments. So I think going forward, and just underlining what has been said also by previous speakers, in order for us to succeed in this space, we need collective action, but we also need bold action. And it requires everyone gets around the table, from policymakers and governments to private sector, everyone across the plastic value chain, civil society, and financial institutions. We cannot read or find solutions to this problem if we are not collaborating and cooperating. Only if we get together as a ecosystem of solutions providers will we be able to put an end to this problem. I think the second takeaway for me is the investment opportunity and the need for increased resources and the need for action. I think we have heard enough around commitments and what needs to be done. I think and we can continue those conversations, but it's only if we start to investing in the real solutions on the ground and taking them to scale that we will actually make a real change in the communities and for the where it matters the most and for the livelihood of the people that today are most negatively impacted by plastic waste in the environment. And the third one that I want to focus on is the involvement of the private sector. I think the private sector is a critical actor and player when we talk plastic waste in the environment. Only if we bring them in and create opportunities for them to be the platform for where innovation and solutions are being developed, will we also here be able to find the real scalable, not only solutions, but pathway forward that are required at a global level to address this problem.
Thank you, Jakob. So over to you, Phineas, in 3 bullet points, what would be your recommendations?
Okay, three bullet points. Number one, information, data uniformity and traceability on plastic waste globally is absolutely critical. This will help support entrepreneurs and emerging technologies because we're seeing real interesting growth in recovered materials in finished goods, textiles, packaging, but that's been held up by the data and the availability of that material. So if we can get there on that, that will definitely help these new businesses. But secondly, the information will support a much bigger step up in multilateral action on what is needed to mitigate dangerous plastic pollution. So in the same way that in climate change, we talk about net zero carbon, we need to get policymakers now moving towards a unified target of net zero plastic waste. So that information will underpin better and more informed multilateral action, which is absolutely critical, and it will enable the finance industry and investment management industries to actually utilize that data and start modeling in a more robust way the opportunity. And then finally, while I'm extremely excited about innovation in design of plastic packaging and R&D and materials, and that there's some really amazing breakthrough technologies around chemical recycling, etc. I'm actually going to choose recycling infrastructure technologies as the final priority and solution for me. We are ultimately still a long way away from where we need to be on recycling infrastructure globally. So that we definitely need to step up in investment, and this is an area where sustainable finance and banking can facilitate that capital flow into those projects in Asia Pacific. So for me, that's where we can really achieve scale in a big way, and where capital markets can play a role. But I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Phineas. And over to you, Praveen. What are your top 3 bullet points for the steps forward?
Yes, sure, Naka. Top 3, not necessarily in any order. I think one, we did talk about this whole concept of citizen scientists. We have used that very effectively in the UNEP prototype that we did. I think that combined with a good data governance model should actually be able to make use of a good crowdsourcing of knowledge. So that is one part. The second is for adopting and scaling these kind of technologies to solve large environment problems. We find that there is lack of buyer who asks for these grand, large-scale environment dealing technologies, right? So I think when organizations such as UN or AEPW come and put their bets on some of these platforms, such as PRISM or the Global Marine Litter Platform, I think we should use these as the convener of data. Instead of silos of data, everyone needs to cooperate and try to put into one platform and take out of there and make it quite interoperable. I think that's very important in terms of cooperation and funding. And thirdly, I think the scale of the problem and its global impact, I think we heard the numbers from everyone. This should actually incentivize the government and other institutions to fund towards development and discovery of such innovative solutions and their adoption. So I think this is where I would leave my 3 points, Naka. Back to you.
Yes, thank you, Praveen. Over to you, Heidi.
Thank you. So we would really recommend a regional Asia Pacific long-term framework and strategy that embeds holistic criteria in all investment decision-making processes from industry, government, and other funding bodies to mitigate negative unintended consequences. Just because you can make something out of recycled plastic doesn't mean that you should. We need to be asking, is that end product going to be fit for purpose? And does it really just delay landfill, or is it really diverting from landfill? Now, Tangaroa Blue Foundation is part of the International Waste Platform, which is a network of 32 national hubs, all dealing with plastics and plastic pollution in their countries. And we recommend utilising and supporting these existing and established networks to build citizen science opportunities to contribute, and not just starting from scratch. There is already so much good work that's been done. And we really want to see the basics get done right. And industry transparency has to be part of that. Credibility in efforts to reduce marine plastics. Now, there's a program, an industry program called Operation Clean Sweep. This should be led to become an industry norm, not just by the leaders. It should be independently audited and mandatory from a regulatory standpoint. If the industry can't stop the loss of plastic feedstock, what confidence do we actually have in solving more complex parts of this issue? And this leads to our concerns around misleading marketing claims. So greenwash marketing claims must be called out and held to account. Consumer confidence and the needed behaviour change will be severely limited otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. And over to you, Mr. Tahar.
Yeah, thank you, Naka. I think the key message is about the collaboration to handle the plastic waste pollution. I think we have to make the good collaboration. In Indonesia experience, we have in the upstream about the producer, as a stakeholder. So they have the commitment to reduce the plastic waste from the packaging and the product. In the midstream, we have a public, right? We encourage the eco-living lifestyle. We encourage the public participation, like a waste bank, like a social entrepreneur, like a sector informal in Indonesia. And in the last, we encourage the local capacity, enhance the local capacity with the intervention with the technology and in the capacity building in the local capacity. In the second, I think we have to encourage the circular economy concept. This is I think a win-win solution. We can we can encourage the producer industry always still grows, and we can solve the plastic waste. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And of course, Ms. Kotani Tomoe, please, if you would, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Naka. I have 3 points that I would like to share. First, while waste management is an urgent and a priority, it is important to take measures for the entire life cycle, including action on upstream of the plastic value chain. Which stage of the life cycle needs focusing depends on the circumstances of each country and region. In Japan, based on the Act on Promotion Resource Regulation for Plastics, which was enacted in June last year, measures will be taken for promoting efforts for resource circulation for plastics, targeting all entities involved in the entire life cycle of plastic containing products, ranging from design to waste disposal. Secondly, in the region where Japan has provided development assistance, sound waste management is still the priority for many countries. as the project's countermeasure implemented by UNEP highlighted. During the COVID-19 pandemic, there is an urgent need to take measures, including preventive policies, at the national, regional, as well as the global level. Japan believes that it's necessary to approach on a global scale while strengthen effective measures in every country and the region according to each situation. Thirdly, Japan considers that international actions are necessary to tackle the marine plastic issues. Japan has prepared a draft resolution on an international legal instrument for sharing at the Forum of Ministers and the Environment Authorities of Asia and Pacific this week, and for its adoption at the UNEA next March. So the draft resolution will provide a direction of discussions for the future international framework so that countries, including those that consume and then discharge large amounts of plastics, can participate in the discussions at the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tomoe. And for the concluding remarks, I would like to return to His Excellency Hans Bratskar as the presidency of UNEA.
Well, thank you so much for taking us through this very interesting discussion so ably and in such an efficient manner. And thank you again to all the participants. And I will be very short in just summing up my thoughts about going forward, as I agree with so many other things that have been said by others, but certainly increased cooperation between all stakeholders globally in the different regions of the world at the country level, inside and outside government, is very much needed. And as we have heard today, we need to continue to build our knowledge to better inform policy making and also then to make more targeted action possible in the future. And we also need a very strong commitment for the long-term work. And as I said earlier, we very much look forward to UNEA 5 Part 2 early next year. And as I said, many countries are now calling for UNEA 5 Part 2 to take a decision to start negotiations for a new global agreement on plastic pollution. So this is an opportunity and an important event for all of us. And thank you so much again for a very valuable discussion. Thank you.
Yes, so this brings us to the end of our panel, and I thank all our speakers and our great audience, and especially for interacting with us so actively. And I would like to remind our panelists as well to check the questions. And unfortunately, we would not have the time to address these questions right at this moment, but we'll make sure to respond to all of your questions and to publish them. Please stay with us for the coming session on zoonotic diseases. Don't go away.